Hey everyone, welcome back to part 3 of Human Change Over Time. In today's video, we're going to have a look at the following dot point, where we'll be having a look at how different evidence that comes to light has allowed scientists to come up with a classification scheme for the hominins, as well as how over time, depending on what that evidence is, it is open to interpretation, can be contested, refined, and obviously changed as more evidence comes to light. Particular evidence that we're going to have a look at that has led to changes in theories links around to the interbreeding between the Homo sapiens and Homo neanderthals, as well as some other Homo species that we'll discuss. And we'll also have a look at how scientists have used different forms of evidence to track those migration patterns and interbreeding between the different Homo species, particularly looking at mitochondrial DNA and how that can be used for the out of Africa hypothesis, as well as some examples of fossils that have shown us the different migration patterns over time. So let's start with the idea of, I guess, where have humans come from? How did humans evolve? That sort of thing. So there were two theories that were going around looking at where modern humans have come from. These theories were known as the out of Africa hypothesis and the multi-regional hypothesis. So we're going to have a look at both of them and the types of evidence that scientists were looking for to support those theories, and then which one the fossil evidence actually supported. So the out of Africa hypothesis took on the idea that all modern day humans have evolved from Africa, or ancestors who lived in Africa, and over time we've obviously moved to occupy different regions of the world. So if you're looking at the diagram that's on the screen here, down here, obviously we're looking at ancestors back here. These ancestors split into genuses from Homo. And we can see that this branch here is in Europe, this branch is in Africa, this branch is in Asia. And if we follow those branches down, those ancestors that were in Europe and Asia actually became extinct. Okay, so no longer can continue down that evolutionary path. However, the Homo ancestors that existed in Africa, their line still continues. And we see that over time, that line, as it's evolving in Africa, will eventually spread out and occupy different places of Earth until we get what we know as modern day humans in Europe, Africa, Asia, pretty much all over the world. Okay, so they have all originated from an ancestral population in Africa. The multi-regional hypothesis, so the second hypothesis that scientists were looking at, is that modern day humans evolved in different regions of the world simultaneously. So they didn't all originate from the one main population somewhere on the planet. They originated from lots of different populations at the same time. So we're going back to that idea of this is an ancestor of the Homo, and that ancestor splits into populations in Asia, Africa, Europe, all over the world. And each of those new populations continues to evolve, but they're evolving in the same way, so that they're evolving into the same new species until we get to modern day humans in each of these locations. And the reason they think that this is possible is because these populations in Europe, Africa, and Asia, for example, they were not separated. Okay, they were still able to experience gene flow between these populations, and that's why each location around the world was able to evolve simultaneously, because they were all sharing those genes or those traits that were selected for, and that's why each population was selecting for the same advantage, I guess. Okay, so let's have a look at what evidence scientists were looking for to support either hypothesis, and then we'll have a look at what the evidence actually supports. So the evidence that we would be looking for to support either of these theories, if we were trying to support the out of Africa hypothesis, where all modern day humans have originated from an ancestral population from Africa, we would expect to see modern day humans appearing first in Africa and then branching out later on to other parts of the world. Okay, We would also expect to see those transitional fossils moving from the ancestral genus Homo to modern day humans only in Africa. We wouldn't expect to see those transitional fossils anywhere else in the world. And we would expect to see the mitochondrial DNA in African populations to be consistent with what we are seeing in modern day humans, and that those African populations have the greatest variation. If we're looking at the multi-regional hypothesis, the evidence that scientists would be looking for is that evidence of modern day humans would appear all over the world at the same time, roughly the same time in history. They would also expect to see those transitional fossils of ancestral humans to be found all over the world, so Africa, Europe, Asia, etc. And they would also expect to see that the mitochondrial DNA throughout humans is roughly the same, depending on where you're looking at in the world, because all humans have evolved at the same time from different populations throughout the world. So let's have a look at what the evidence actually supports. So all three pieces of evidence needed to support the out of Africa hypothesis actually exist, and none of the evidence that supports the multi-regional hypothesis exists. So we have fossil evidence that proves that modern day humans appear in Africa first, and we have evidence that proves that these transitional fossils are found only in Africa. So the two pieces of information for the out of Africa hypothesis first. And they've actually analysed our mitochondrial DNA in modern humans, and they are actually able to trace back every human's mitochondrial DNA sequence to a population that once existed in Africa. So that supports that idea that all humans have originated from a population in Africa, not that we have originated from different populations scattered throughout the world. If that was the case, we would expect to see some sort of variation in our mitochondrial DNA, not leading back to Africa. Just for those of you who are wondering what mitochondrial DNA, it's obviously DNA that's found in your mitochondria. Fun fact, most of your mitochondrial DNA is only inherited via your mother. So your father doesn't really contribute to your mitochondrial DNA, and that's what makes it so easy for scientists to be able to track back your mitochondrial DNA and link it back to these populations in Africa, because theoretically you should have the same mitochondrial DNA as your mum, as her mum, as her mum, as her mum, as her mum, all the way back through your maternal line. Okay, so we're now going to have a look at, I guess, some changing ideas that have occurred due to the fossil record. The first one that we're going to speak about is the relationship between modern day humans, so Homo sapiens, and Homo neanderthals. So Neanderthalus was thought to have been a direct ancestor to modern day humans. So scientists believe that we had evolved directly from Neanderthals, but new evidence has come to light to debunk that theory, and it's actually showing that modern day humans and Neanderthals have diverged from a common ancestor. Okay, so we did not evolve from Neanderthals. We are a separate population from them that has evolved from a common ancestor. So if you're looking at the image on the screen here, we can see our common ancestor highlighted in light blue. There was some sort of speciation event that has occurred here, and one population has evolved into modern day humans, another population has evolved into Neanderthals. Okay, so we can see how those two individual species have arisen from a common ancestor. I guess a little bit of evidence that maybe scientists aren't really sure what it means at this stage is that they are finding trace evidence of Neanderthal DNA in modern day human populations. Okay, and they believe that this is because there was some interbreeding happening between modern day humans and Neanderthals at these points in the diagram here. Okay, so lots of the populations that occupy West Africa, New Guinea, East Asia, Western Europe, that sort of thing, there is evidence that Neanderthal DNA can be found in those descendants, which then raises the question, well, if there was a speciation event that occurred here that led to a population evolving into modern humans and a population evolving into Neanderthals, if they were technically two separate species, how is it that they are able to interbreed and produce fertile offspring who are passing on those genes to future generations? So this is what we're talking about when we say, the fossil record might paint one picture, but there are lots of ways to interpret that fossil record, and there are lots of pieces of evidence that might contest what's being put forward. And it's really because we don't have that full picture of what's been happening millions and millions of years ago to say with certainty what has happened. The other example that your study design would like you to have a look at is the species of Homo denisovans. Okay, so these were a group of Homo that were only discovered in the last, 15, 20 years maybe. So their fossils are quite new in discovery. So this species wasn't known to exist for a while. And it's believed that they existed at the same time as Neanderthals and modern day humans, the Homo sapiens. Okay, so just like scientists are now seeing evidence that Neanderthals and Homo sapiens interbred because modern day humans have Neanderthal DNA in them, they're now finding evidence that shows that this group of individuals that they've termed Homo denisovans also interbred with modern day humans, specifically the Melanesian and Papua New Guinea populations. Okay, so if we're looking at the image here, we have the Denisovan line in orange here. Okay, and we are seeing interbreeding happening from the Denisovans to the Melanesian and Papua New Guinea populations here. So individuals in modern day humans that originate from this area of the world do actually have some Denisovan DNA in them. Okay, we can also see interbreeding in this diagram between Neanderthals and humans. Okay, so Neanderthals are the blue ones breeding with green. We've got these green ones breeding with these Neanderthals, and then Neanderthals breeding with Denisovans as well. Okay, so lots of interbreeding between these three different, what scientists have termed separate species of Homo. But again, it raises that question of, if they are separate species, how is it possible that they were able to interbreed and produce fertile offspring? Is it that part of our fossil record might be missing? We are, after all, just looking at fossils of these individuals. We're not actually looking at their full physiological makeup. Maybe part of the puzzle is missing, and once we have that part of the puzzle, maybe that theory of them being separate species will be changed. Maybe scientists will one day say, you know what? Neanderthals, Denisovans, and Sapiens were actually all the same species. They just varied in certain characteristics due to where they lived on Earth. Okay, so who knows what the fossil record is going to uncover as time goes on, but the point that you need to realize is that as new evidence comes to light, new things may be added to the evolutionary tree when we're looking at hominin evolution. It could also be that past theories are changed, adapted, or maybe even scrapped altogether because this new evidence comes to light.